Hi, I'm John Morehead. Pleased to welcome you to the third in our webinar series. Happy to be your moderator for today's session. Today we're joined by three special guests, Colt Meraw from Baker Tilly and Adam Bridges and Blair Lewis from Archetype. Could each of you please introduce yourselves and provide a brief background and share some insights about your experience working with government contractors?
Thanks, John. I'm Colt Meraw, Director on the GovCon Technologies team within Baker Tilly's Digital Solutions practice. I bring over 15 years of experience in government contracting, finance, and digital transformation, working both on the consulting and industry side. I have a track record of delivering, digital transformation results for numerous organizations with expertise leading implementation, integration, and optimization projects across several performance management, enterprise resource planning, and business intelligence solutions. Prior to Baker Tilly, I worked on the industry side at a mid-sized government contractor where I led the FP&A, pricing, and business intelligence functions.
And hey, I'm Adam Bridges. I'm a director in Archetype's corporate performance management practice as a planning lead and architect. And so I've got, around 6 years or so experience in CPM consulting directly. Prior to consulting, I worked in FP&A most recently with a government contractor. So kind of getting that firsthand experience on what it's like as a from that user perspective. And so I'm excited to join this discussion.
And I am Blair Lewis. I am a planning lead and architect within the CPM practice here at Archetype. I am a CPA that has transitioned into really FP&A, spending parts of my career in various areas from treasury, financial systems, audit in the beginning part of my career, and then really landing on my passion in the FP&A space, that then transitioned into becoming an architect in the OneStream space, specializing in FP&A. I have a diverse background with experiences, working in public accounting, industry, at a government contractor, and then most recently working in consulting in the government contracting space.
Awesome. A lot of great experience today in the room. Glad to have you with us. Thank you. So I think most, if not all, government contractors have some kind of project level planning that they need to deliver. Given what we've built for our clients, Colt, can you talk a little bit about first the high level business objectives that we know need to be achieved that we've seen out there?
Yeah, I mean, every government contractor typically has a team of project control or project managers that are building out project ETCs or estimates to complete and estimates at complete on an ongoing basis. Unfortunately, a lot of times this data is in their ERP or in offline Excel spreadsheets or even maybe in a homegrown tool and not necessarily tied directly to their performance management platform and where they're actually doing their enterprise planning for their AOP and for their rolling forecasts. Being able to take that process and bring it into your performance management solution where that data can load into your AOP or load into your forecast or even be even in the system for just comparison purposes really empowers the FP&A function to feel good about how does their top-down forecast or the top-down targets align with the bottoms-up budgets for the work they have in the hand and the work they think they're going to win from an opportunity perspective, and also their gap for their go-get or for their wedge.
Yeah, and I think one of the features that we've been able to provide to some of our clients in this space that Colt talked about, how sometimes they're doing this in Excel or sometimes they're doing this in a solution outside of performance management, is really giving them the ability to plan at a level maybe that in the past they haven't been able to plan at. And that's one of the really unique things about OneStream and the ability to bring in ancillary tables and plan things outside of the cube. For example, going down to even a vendor level or a resource level, and then also spanning out a long horizon that sometimes government contractors need to fulfill those EAC requirements. Is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? It really just depends on the client and their specific line of business. And so being able to, go in and size that out and really help transform their process from what they're doing today by making it so much more flexible and dynamic is just really unique.
Yeah, and speaking of being able to budget out as far as they need to, right? They have certain requirements from a compliance standpoint. So,
Mhm.
think of 606 revenue recognition standards where they have to be able to forecast out as long as they need to understand where they should be changing their revenue to align to their current forecasts on the delivery of their services or products. The other thing that's really nice about project budgeting is, not only is it going to be able to give you that bottoms up approach, depending on how detailed you do or don't want to be, like Blair was saying, right? And do the complex burden and revenue calculations within the tool that you're using. You can also leverage it for your back office support functions or your home office if you're
Mhm.
also trying to do project-based budgeting in those support functions too. So OneStream really does give you the flexibility and this project budgeting solution as a whole to be able to say, hey, I obviously need to do direct. It's already happening from a project control function, but maybe there's some other elements of my enterprise-wide AOP or my forecast that could also be leveraged and use project budgeting in my build-up. Um, OneStream also allows you to then control the versions that are going on from a project control standpoint. So a lot of times people are
Mhm.
doing these EACs and ETCs, and they're not connected directly to a specific AOP or directly to a what if
Mhm.
scenario or to a rolling forecast. So being able to align that project budgeting and project control function to the scenarios in your performance management system allows you to understand where you're at any point on any of your plan scenarios. And then, like I said, it's really this ability to handle the complex burden and revenue calculations to make sure you're checking the box for that cost accounting standards and to align to the way your indirect cost structures and pools are designed. So being able to handle however many different fringe, overhead, G&A, M&H pools you might have, and being able to handle all the different types of revenue calculations you need for the different contract vehicles out there, whether that's a simple cost plus, a fixed price, or complex T&M, or some things that have some unique fee overrides and other caps or ceilings within the contract itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you guys, from a high level requirements perspective, is there's a lot of different things that need to happen around project planning. And, what we've seen is a desire to bring those onto a central platform or a central tool, right? Which I think really tees up nicely for kind of the next question I was going to ask is, I guess, giving these high level objectives and the fact that there are multiple tools out there, again, some of them homegrown, but there are other tools available to achieve each of these kind of individual objectives. What do you think makes OneStream stand out as the best tool to achieve all of these objectives together?
Yeah, so obviously it goes back to the complex requirements of a government contractor, but what OneStream allows you to do is, for me, it's two main things, right? Blair touched on it earlier. It's that ability for OneStream to handle both relational and multidimensional data, right? A lot of performance management platforms, you're only in the cube, so you're only in multidimensional data sets. But OneStream's ability to leverage both allows you to get more detailed from a relational standpoint if you need to budget down to a labor category or to an individual employee or for specific subcontractors or vendors. That functionality is there, and you can get as detailed as you'd like. Um, the other thing is, OneStream platform just being open in terms of your ability to leverage the functionality that OneStream provides, but then kind of build your own applications on top of that, which gets back to the point of being able to do project budgeting as detailed as you need, deciding what level of detail does or doesn't get loaded to the cube when you try to summarize it, and also being able to handle those complex burden and revenue calculations.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
OneStream. Oh, I think OneStream also has seamless integration points. So it's very simple to integrate OneStream with your ERP, for example, CostPoint or SAP, or with a data warehouse if that's where you house your data. And I think that's really key to project budgeting because through the performance, putting it in your performance management solution, you're able to collect data points from all over and bring it together to really make seamless planning for the planners and not having to go and find information all different places. It's stored right there for you, and you have everything you need at your fingertips to have a very linear logical flow of planning out projects.
Yeah, in particular, like the projects you need, the resources you need, the logic behind the burden and revenue calculations from the project setup structures, all bringing that in and then allowing OneStream to perform those things on the plan data.
Absolutely, and possibility to even bring in Salesforce information or wherever you capture your new business or your funnel. And then one of the things that I think is really beneficial to the organization is being able to refresh that information at your cadence. Is that every hour maybe for something? Is that every day? Is it every week? Is it every quarter? And really having ultimate control over that, and that kind of goes back to the versioning that Colt was talking about earlier. Is really being able to control that versioning based on where you are in your process, and ultimate control there.
I think one of the things I'm hearing you guys say too is, there are things that make sense for a planning system to own. Like, again, going back to that ETC EAC, that you were mentioning, Colt, like you want people to go in and have a central system to input, the estimates of work remaining. And that's one thing that OneStream really excels at. But what we don't want to do is have to replicate a bunch of data points, manually. We want to bring other data points in from those source systems that have, that maintain those as their source of truth, so that we can, offset or show additional sets of data that are included in the process, but we don't own them, right? And we can have kind of a unified a system that brings a lot of stuff together, even if it doesn't, again, own or put those points together. So I think that really is one of the powerful things about OneStream, because you don't have to, again, going back to that relational and multidimensional, you don't have to fit into one or the other. You have the ability to hold both and kind of rationalize them together. I hear a lot, you're kind of hinting at a lot of calculations that need to happen around project-based planning. Maybe can you talk a little bit, Adam, about the complexity of those calculations and how OneStream handles that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with government contractors, I'd say the main complexity that we really have to address with any planning model is the concept of these complex burdens that are performed. And so, with those burdens, they follow like a cascading structure where, the different layers of direct costs, like fringe, overhead, G&A, are applied in sequence to the direct costs that are calculated. So ultimately what that means is each layer builds upon the previous one. And so what that does is it influence the total kind of cost picture on these projects. So what OneStream has been so great with is, since we're able to build a solution using, ancillary tables, we're able to really define all of those cost pools and, loop through those, building up the total kind of cost profile. And so, we found that, there's definitely ways to make that, quite performant. So, there's definitely, it varies from client to client, but, we could have hundreds to thousands of different cost bases that need to be calculated. And so, we've addressed that in a few different ways. The main one is we've kind of built out this dynamic sizing to know which plan records need to be calculated. And so, I think that's definitely an improvement from a lot of other, other solutions that may be out in the marketplace.
Yeah, so that ability to only calc the new data that we know we need to calculate, because it's such a vast pool of data we're talking about, such granular data, you don't want to have to churn over everything regularly, right? You want to only calculate what you need to recalculate. Yeah, and so Colt, I think one of the things that we've talked about before is the fact that, again, going back to what I just said previously, we don't want to maintain those definitions of those pools again in OneStream. We don't want to have OneStream, go in and hold on to those definitions and people key them in like they often do with an Excel system, right? Where they're like, okay, well, I've got to create these additional cost pool and replicate what's in Cost Point or an SAP. Instead, I want to pull from those definitions of how those burden rates are applied. I'm going to apply them to my plan data, right? So I'm going to use that to create new data, but I don't have to manually duplicate a big set of data around a really important calculation. So maybe talk to me a little bit, Colt, about how you see this kind of ability for these calculations to influence a client's ability to do what if planning, though. Like, what if I do want to change my pools or rates, and I don't want to have too much duplicate data from the definition of those pools?
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical use case, right? Well, going back to what Adam was saying too, right? So we can take your definitions from your source ERP system, whether that's account org combinations that drive your burden calculations, or you have cost centers, or you have like pool flagging that you do on accounts or cost centers or organizations, to really get to that complex burden calculation and have those definitions. But the biggest use case that you're talking about, John, is government contractors on a yearly basis, and sometimes even more frequently than that, have to actually update the rates for their indirect cost pools, right? And so a typical government contractor is going to submit for rates for the government. When they get approved, right, they become their provisional billing rates, right? So that might be the time that they want to cascade it through. More typically is, I'm building up to my AOP. As I'm building an AOP, part of that build process is all the different cost inputs that make up all my pools, right? And what do those rates come out to, right? Well, I have an organization that's gone through, all the project controllers have gone and forecasted out their plans, but now all of a sudden the fringe rate has changed, the overhead rates have changed, the G&A rates have changed, right? And being able to go into a tool and basically just plug those rate changes in and then run a calc all function and let those calculations on both the burdens, total cost, and the revenue flow through all of your project budgets, and then see what the impact of that is, like really quickly, and being able to analyze that impact is really powerful so that they can understand what's going to happen from a profitability perspective on each of these projects and for each of their business units or groups really quickly without having to do a lot of manual intervention and rolling up of offline Excel sheets or however else they're doing this plan data without the ability to run the recalculations.
Yeah. And this is an area that's been huge for users or project controllers, where in other planning tools, running this kind of calculate all that Colt mentioned isn't even a possibility. And so what it required was all of these users to go in and calculate each of their projects they're responsible for one by one. And so, the time associated with that is huge. And by the time you sum all of those man hours across the organization, you're really looking at a lot of time lost. Whereas in OneStream, with the tool that we've built, we're seeing, calculation time significantly improved, even in an instance where the entire organization took, 20 to 30 minutes, as opposed to, countless hours that would have been spent otherwise in other tools. So I think that's been a win for the platform.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was going to say, I think project control is going to be super happy that they don't have to go in and do this themselves. John, sorry to interrupt. The other use case I wanted to point out too is it's not just, hey, if my rates change, but like, hey, I have a cost accounting change and I'm submitting it for a change to DCAA or whoever my cognizant agency is, right? Or I know that some of the structures of my pools have changed, or I've added other accounts and other orgs and I need those to roll through the calculations. There's so many use cases where you've just streamlined that entire calculation process on project budgets that are already in the system.
Well, and again, I guess what I was going to say about that is all of this hints at the fact that a much smaller team, can make changes and analyze the impact of those changes relatively quickly, right? So you have a much smaller amount of people who are able to focus in on, well, what are the true impacts of these potential changes that we want to model out, again, as opposed to having a large organization all have to participate, which I think gives a lot of power. So we've talked a lot about the fact that project controllers are obviously going to be using the system. There's a lot of very granular data that needs to go in, and so we've got this powerful engine that can calculate. All that's really important, but in order to get that granular data in and have it regularly updated, I think you need to have a user interface that's reasonable. And this kind of was one of the things that I think we went back earlier and said, going back to what we said earlier, one of the things that OneStream offers is the ability to kind of craft this solution on top of the core platform talk a little bit about crafting that user experience so that we can have a system that makes sense to these different subsets of users and really streamline for their experience individually.
Yeah, so, obviously anytime we go into an organization, we try to keep that, end user experience at the forefront of our mind, right? Because our number one, goal isn't just to create this amazing engine that can do all of these things in a very short amount of time, which is great, right? But we need people to adopt it so that, the organization is, happy with the tool and the outputs are what they want them to be, because you've got enthusiastic end users about their experience as well, and it's not taking them a step backwards. And so, we go in, we kind of look at the current process, we look at, how can we build this in a way that makes it easy for the users to interact with it in a linear, logical fashion. And so, one of the things that, we've done as part of this solution that we've rolled out to, clients is giving the ability to enter through a dashboard and then also enter through the OneStream spreadsheet functionality. So, a lot of people prefer that Excel type look and feel. And then some people don't, right? So giving flexibility in the way that we present the data and collect the data from the users. And then you talked, John, a little bit too about kind of like building this into the native OneStream application and the ability to make use of, other parts of OneStream, for example, like the security. And so that may be a concern that people have around bringing this information into, their performance management solution, especially when you're talking about dealing with, salary information or potentially confidential, burdening information. Or even specific projects that are confidential that you don't want other users to see. And so being able to make use of that native, workflow type security for the users, and then even being able to add on an additional layer of security and what we've built around, project-based security, what type of salary information people can or can't see, and then, what level within the organization based on where they sit. And so just being able to make use of some of those inherent OneStream functionality really kind of like adds on to making this a really wonderful user experience for the end users.
Yep. And at the end of the day, all of this planning is taking space within the user's workflow, within a workspace. And so with that, you have all of the native capabilities with the platform around workflows, such as like security, like Blair mentioned, locking of those periods. You have that workflow audit history retained. You have the ability to incorporate different confirmation rules, when users go to complete their forecasts, executive review, kind of et cetera there. But it just kind of goes back to, this isn't, while it's in a way an application within an application, it still hinges on those, core functionality, with the OneStream platform itself.
Yeah, I think control is a big thing there, right? So if I'm in charge of a function or a department or a business unit, being able to lock down those workflows and control when my project managers or project controllers can or can't make updates that will impact my rolling forecast or my AOP. It's funny, the spreadsheet functionality is so useful. We talk about getting people out of Excel, but at the end of the day, people love the look and feel of Excel. So if you can give them the look and feel of Excel in the application and the ability to copy and paste and spread out hours really quickly in an Excel view and save it and have it be a more seamless input for the end user, it goes a long way. And speaking of the user interface, resource planning is huge for a lot of organizations, right? And so if you're getting down to detailed individuals and when you're doing your project budgets, like being able to click on a resource and on the same screen of that dashboard input, being able to see that resource, all the projects they're budgeted against for those specific months, how many hours, what that totals up to, and how that compares to the available hours for the period. Really, it just lets the end users know, like, hey, I want to go budget John Smith, and he's fully utilized already, right? And then also it allows leadership to run utilization reports off the project budgets to know, where they might have funding gaps out in the future.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I'm hearing a lot of what for me as a long time OneStream resource working with the system, I can see a lot of the different parts of the platform that you guys are talking about leveraging, and it's cool to hear how it's leveraged for this specific uh, you know use case, I guess, because like you said, Cole, generally when we talk about OneStream, we're trying to get people out of Excel and into the central system, but people do love Excel, and especially that idea of the way they're used to interacting with data. So we can get them in the system in one source of truth, but allow them to maintain that look and feel. That's a really powerful, selling, if you will, to those end users. Going back to what Blair said about adoption, and again, going back to what we mentioned before around bringing that ancillary data, that other data in, you can show that stuff. Like you said, you can see not just Colt, like you said, what a person's budgeted for, which is super important, but also you might be able to see some ancillary information about those projects, maybe end dates and stuff. So okay, maybe if I push my use of this person out just a few months, this because this other project's going to end, then I'll have the ability to start using this resource. And again, we don't want to own the project end date. We want to bring that in from other systems, but in a dashboard in OneStream, we can present all that information in a really useful way. And that goes back to how we craft the user experience, not just the input, not just the where I'm doing the clicks, but really how data is displayed and where my input is, can really make a large difference in how easy a system is to use, how much users like it, and therefore really the quality of data. Because the more a user likes and enjoys using the system, or at least doesn't hate it, the more they're going to be in the system regularly updating it and be okay with all that. So yeah, all very cool. So when we talk about crafting this user experience, that kind of brings us back to I think every client thinks about their business a little bit differently. Every government contractor is thinking about their project planning a little bit different. I think the team here knows there's some core things though that we can pull and use across multiple clients. So maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen as the how we can use what we built before to benefit prospective clients.
Yeah, so I mean, just even outside of GovCon, a lot of organizations do project-based budgeting, and it's a very bottoms-up, input-driven approach. So there's a lot of just core functionality in project budgeting that can be leveraged, inside government contracting and outside government contracting. But one of the things that can be rebuilt or can be leveraged is that every government contractor has to follow a certain set of regulations, a certain set of cost accounting standards, and things that they have to do from a compliance angle. And the way that burdens calculate and the way that revenue calculate for different types of contract vehicles is pretty consistent amongst government. There's a lot of different nuances all over the spectrum when it comes to government contracting, but the core way that these things calculate are the same, right? So you build it once or twice, and it's like you have a repeatable thing because you can take the same logical way that burden application happens, that revenue calculations happen, and apply it for prospective clients as well. There's also, the partnership between Baker Tilly and Archetype, I think, is really what drives our success in this area. Archetype coming with, years of experience doing OneStream implementation successfully. Baker Tilly having a team of GovCon technology experts doing a range of applications, really knowing the GovCon space. And at Baker Tilly, we also have an entire team dedicated to the compliance elements of GovCon and redesigning indirect rate cost pools. And all of these pieces are important because you have to think about them when you're designing a solution that's going to be compliant for these clients.
Yeah, I think absolutely the partnership, between us is key because, as we've gone through these engagements, it's given us opportunity as developers to further enhance the solutions that we've built to make them more configurable and dynamic, for future clients. And so, in addition, as the saying is, as OneStream goes, we go. So, as they continue to enhance the platform itself, there's a ton of new functionality that's came out recently and also is coming down the pipe that, we're also very excited to implement in a planning solution like this. And so, yeah, I think it's great news for us as a partnership and also for our clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that I'll say, I think, in talking to you guys, in about some of the details of what's been built is, again, like you said, Cole, the project planning isn't just limited to government contractors, and so the more we've built project planning solutions as we have outside of the government contracting space, the more we learn about how do we best take advantage of the platform, and how do we best set up data structures to support this, and again calculations to be configurable as opposed to like hard coded. How do we pull definitions of calculations from systems like CostPoint or SAP and replicate them, and so not have to code any logic into what we're building, but take advantage of those configuration points. And I think we found that over time, as we become more and more refined, there's a strong core of functionality that does translate from client to client. Maybe those user experiences do change a little bit based on your particular workflow, but at the same time, inputting project hours, whether it's by labor category or individual resources, inputting hours over time, right? That's a basic operation you're going to do kind of anywhere. So, I think we have a lot of reusable UI elements as well. Yeah. So I think last question from my perspective is, with everything we've talked about and have done around project planning so far, where do you see it kind of evolving into in the future?
So I think that one use case that clients could, benefit from implementing a project planning solution would be future reorganizations. So, I've lived through many in my career, and it's, something that's always a challenge, but it's something that OneStream helps address relatively easily, whether it's on, a cube-based reorganization from, trying to restate your actuals, or from a planning perspective, and that really spills over into the project planning space as well, even in the ancillary tables, and in some ways the functionality that I think Colt was talking about earlier, with ease to be able to override your burdens and do a calculate all, really is a game changer for organizations and their ability to model out reorganizations. It just becomes another what if model, right? And so being able to have that information at your fingertips, I think, is really beneficial for clients as they move forward in their journey.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, being able to take plan data and, convert it if they need to actually change the underlying data to different organizations or entities. And then, like you said, run a calc all and see what the impact is, or change those rate structures based off of their reorg and run a calc all to see what the impact is to these different projects and the profitability. It really allows, especially for these reorgs, to do that cost impact analysis that's required when you do a reorg and you try to submit for new cost structures with the federal government. The other thing that I see, I mean, you could take project planning, and the flexibility of the OneStream platform really allows you to do as much as you want. So if you're an organization that has enough of these types of nuances in your clients, you can set cost fee overrides, burden caps. You could set funding ceilings at the task order, the CLIN, the SLIN, the ACRIN, like the functionality that can be added to meet your specific use cases is kind of endless for any government contractor here, and what is possible with the project planning solution.
Oh, very cool. Well, I wanted to thank you guys, Colt, Adam, Blair, again for your insights today, for sharing your experiences and deploying OneStream to tackle these complexities of project level planning. I'll say to anyone watching, if you're exploring project level planning or have any needs around project level planning, please feel free to connect with any one of us. We'd all be happy to jump on a call with you sometime and discuss what challenges you might be facing or goals that you need to achieve, and how we can leverage the experience we have at Baker Tilly and Archetype to help assist you in achieving those goals or tackling those challenges. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Blair.
Thanks all.